There are three fundamental aspects to any great narrative: the beginning, the middle, and the end. Whilst the beginning and middle are incredibly important, serving as ways to hook and interest the consumer, a strong ending is far more essential, as a poorly written conclusion can leave the rest of the story feeling colourless and dull. For instance, Xenoblade 3 has a great introduction, setting up plot points and the world masterfully, along with a captivating climax for the middle of the story, but this can all become overshadowed due to the poorly thought out ending, leaving many players perplexed and tainting the entirety of the adventure. Which is why today, I have attempted to recreate the ending in a way that stays true to the original plotline, whilst also building a more fulfilling story. Before we jump into all of that though, I'd like 30 seconds of your time to ask you to quickly help me with the YouTube algorithm by leaving a like on this video and subscribing to the channel. I'm aiming for 10,000 subs by the end of 2022, and only you can help me break out of this endless now and seize the future. But now that that's all out of the way, let's take a look at how Xenoblade Chronicles 3 should have ended. So before we can get to fixing the ending, we first need to know what's wrong with it. Just like Ouroboros, there are 6 major issues that I have identified, which will need resolving to make the final 2 chapters satisfactory. Starting with chapter 6, the first major issue is that it is far too short. Normally, this wouldn't be an issue as every chapter tends to vary in length anyway, but in Xenoblade 3, chapters are usually quite long, making this one, which is much shorter, feel inherently anticlimactic and lazy, especially when coming off of the high of chapter 5, therefore requiring that we extend it, putting it in line with the other chapters. Secondly, CAPTOCORN PEAK is a disgrace to Xenoblade locations. I could make a whole video about everything wrong with this area, and I might, but as I stated in my Xenoblade 3 review, this area is bland, boring, and serves literally only one purpose, which honestly ruined the majority of chapter 6 for me. It will never happen, but if Monolith were to ever go back and expand some of these areas via DLC or an update, CAPTOCORN PEAK would be the top of my list, along with the Greatsword's base. Finally, we will need to fix Mio's bullshit Ascension quest. Now for the most part, this quest is fine, and I find it's a clever way to bring back Ethel and Kamuravi. Screw Muamba and Hacked though. But it's all ruined by the bullshit music sequence. I'm all for music and off-scene being an integral part of this game, but this makes no sense and needs changing. As for chapter 7, the Origin Metal treasure hunt is the absolute worst. This isn't fun from a gameplay perspective and doesn't make sense from a narrative one either, and is the game's lowest point. So yeah, changes needed. I also want to make a few tweaks to Origin 2. Apart from being a complete enigma, the area feels a bit unimaginative and superficial, especially compared to the World Tree. At least, that's what I've heard a lot from others. I actually quite like Origin personally, although there's still a couple of parts that could use some improvement. Lastly, there is a sheer lack of explanations relating to important plot points within this game. Origin, the Sword of the End, Riku, the Black Fog, Light, Nopon, and Annihilation events all aren't explained, and that is only naming a few. I appreciate that the DLC story can help with this and bring some clarification to some of these points, but you're on major copium if you think all of these will get a look in. I want to emphasize though that everything I haven't mentioned I actually rather like. The start of chapter 6 is still phenomenal, Nia and the Wild Ride fight is pretty cool, and the actual finishing cutscene is incredible, arguably as good as chapter 5's moment for those who have a brain big enough to comprehend it. Even so, to make some of the flaws work in a reasonable way that doesn't require me to completely rewrite the ending, I have had to tweak some other parts around them, so just know that I didn't alter these themselves because I thought they were bad, and simply did it to fix everything else. Now then, let's get on with how I think things should have played out, and immediately start addressing how short chapter 6 is, by starting it later. The beginning of chapter 6 is still incredible, but I have always thought and just considered it a part of chapter 5. It never really made much sense to end the chapter where we did anyway. Sure, it leaves us on a cliffhanger of Mio and Noah's potential deaths, but just wait another 10 minutes or so and they're back anyway, so I never really saw the point. That's why I'm going to move the start of chapter 6 until after Shania's suicide, continuing to end the chapter with some drama and prepping for the new and improved journey that awaits us. For a short while, most most things will play out the exact same, including the Hope's Rest Law, Mio's hair choice dilemma, and the approach to CAPTOCORN Peak in search of Queen Nia. It's here that we will start to see a bunch of changes, all revolving around improving this awful snowy area, due to its many gameplay and narrativial issues. CAPTOCORN Peak is way too small, the Cloud Keep is too easy to find, being on a direct course with Colony Omega, the home of a true Mobius. There is literally only one quest here, not including hero quests. The whole area is one damned colour, and there is absolutely nothing to explore, and that's just listing a few. Now, as dire as this all looks, there is actually a really simple solution. Just make the whole area bigger. Being larger provides the space necessary to fix all of these issues by having the room to add more variety to the area and make it more interesting overall. It's silly that this flawed area could have been made so much better so easily, and what makes it all the more infuriating is that everything they need is already in game. Take a moment in your spare time and simply look at how much of this area is unused. I would estimate that there is at least 3 times more space hidden away from us, extending all the way down to the Cadencia region as well. According to the affinity chart, the Noppon Caravan Hub should be on this stretch of road, but we can't go there for some reason, and I don't get why. We could have gotten so much Noppon lore from these guys, like why Noppon aren't supposed to interfere, and who Riku really is. But I digress. With this simple change implemented, we head down through the new and improved CAPTOCORN Peak, initiating Mio's side story, setting out for Colony Omega, and rescuing Miyabi from the clutches of Y. As I mentioned before, most of this quest is fine, and it's only once you get to the flute competition that everything goes tits up. Specifically, it's to do with the Sword of the End, somehow channeling something and freeing everyone from Miyabi's tunes. To solve this section, we're just gonna cut it. I'ma be honest with you, we have no idea what's going on here. We think it's some sort of ether speaker, but I still don't fully get how that works yet, and I got no hope of explaining it to you either. So it's honestly easier to just forget that it ever happened at all. Therefore, moving on swiftly, we take the long way round to the Cloud Keep, which should hopefully feel a little bit more challenging to actually reach. But instead of simply placing the key on the altar and revealing it, we have a surprise boss fight with a recognizable theme song. Then shockingly to everyone's surprise, the tiger monster reveals themselves to be Dromark from Xenoblade 2. Now I want to clarify that everything I just said is purely for the narrative and is not to add fan service. Okay, the song is pure fan service, but Dromark will be important in a little bit, so just be patient till then. After beating him in combat and all of us become acquaintances, Dromark reveals that he was guarding the Cloud Keep from Mobius and monsters, and shows us how to activate the key. Proceeding inside, Dromark leads us to Nia's room, where she begins to awaken before being rudely penetrated. Get your mind out of the gutter, obviously being shot by D&J. This commences the Wild Rite fights like normal, as well as Yoren's redemption arc, until we once again reach Nia's bedroom. Awakening once more, we initiate Nia's introduction, as well as her lore exposition, the only difference being that we will receive every ounce of information on our first visit, as we will not be returning to the Cloud Keep outside of her hero quest. This means that we will receive both the origin schematics and Ouroboros Stone right now, and will then immediately proceed to the city to speak with Mr. Salmon. Now typically, Mr. Salmon has already constructed a second boat, and only requires a few pieces of origin metal to finish, which never made any sense to me. Apart from it being his dream creation, Salmon just freely donates this masterpiece after already giving us a boat, both in exchange for absolutely nothing. Now Noppon have been built up over the last 2 games as being quite greedy, hence Noppon merchants. So either Salmon is the most generous Noppon ever, or this whole segment makes no sense. Consequently, instead of us receiving a second boat free of charge, Salmon will upgrade our existing boat for us, in exchange for us collecting the materials required. This then leads us to the collection quest, which also ties into why Dromark is here. Ordinarily, we need to acquire 6 pieces of origin metal scattered around the world, including the Ouroboros Stone we got from Nia. Previously, it took us 2 whole months to get from the Asia region Alfeto Valley to the city located within Swordmarch. Giving the benefit of the doubt, I'd guess that even with city transport ships, it would take at least a week to reach each location where origin metal lies. Meanwhile, the whole time, Nia, who felt the need to hide herself from Mobius for thousands of years, is left alone and vulnerable after just being attacked and wounded by Mobius. Like seriously, we just leave her there, unguarded, after she even stated that her powers are sorely limited currently, meaning Mobius could capture her whenever they like. That's why Dromark is present. He doesn't have to say anything, but you can at least make the argument that he is looking over and protecting her whilst we finish saving the world. Why are there so many plot holes at this part of the game? Anyway, instead of playing through everyone's favourite collectathon, we instead will head straight to Keva's castle, where we will trigger Noah's side story and receive the only piece of origin metal that is required. These events will play out the same, with Chris playing his melody, attracting Noah and the gang to the throne room, where we will ultimately throw down, but afterwards we press on forwards to claim the metal for ourselves. I always found it a bit weird how we never actually got the origin metal located here, but oh well. Heading on behind the throne room, we will then enter another room which contains the origin metal, as well as another pod with a girl sleeping within. You might have guessed, but this will be how we now encounter Melia, awakening her and receiving the shard, similarly to Nia. This is so that Melia, who has like a 200 IQ, can explain everything in this damned game, including what the hell origin is, how the Sword of the End works, what the hell light is, as well as the standard info we received about Zed. This way, most of the lore that was left unclear can be clarified, at least a little bit, and even potentially set up the DLC story even more. Don't be mistaken, however, Melia was still captured by Mobius and in their possession, still being the reason why Zed can access Origin's memories, just through a different way that I'll talk about later. Anyway, now that she is awake, Melia would also make a formal request that we attempt to rescue N from Mobius's control, possibly due to the both of them having some form of connection, similar to how Nia and M spoke a few times in the past. After speaking with her, we head back to the city where Salmon can then prep our boat for the assault on Origin, concluding Chapter 6. This does result in Chapter 7 being rather short now, only featuring the final labyrinth of Origin, but I find that the final chapter should be shorter, especially with the length of Origin and some of the cutscenes in this section. Anyways, after receiving Mio's final diary entry about the night before the assault, we head to our new boat and proceed towards Origin. On the approach, it is made clear that we have three primary objectives. Number 1 is to rescue N, fulfilling Melia's request. Number 2 is to defeat Zed and use Origin to return the world to normal. Finally, number 3 is to deactivate Origin's weapon systems from the inside. It's stated a few times that Zed intends to destroy everyone within Ionios so that he can restart the cycle of the Endless Now all over again. But this plot point is never brought up again in the main game, which is why I will be including it instead. Breaching Origin will be identical to before, with maybe the exclusion of the convenient water puddle the Bravery lands in. As I mentioned previously, I quite like Origin's design and think there are quite a few cool locations within it, but considering how otherworldly and distorted Zed feels, I would have liked to have seen this area represent these feelings a little bit more. To do this, we'll be taking inspiration from another Nintendo series, Pokemon, specifically Pokemon Platinum. My favourite generation and one of my favourite games, Platinum features the Distortion World, the home of Giratina. The essence of this area perfectly captures what Origin is missing in my opinion, and so we'll be borrowing a couple of aspects, with the main one being the changes in gravity. Origin could have felt so much cooler if we were adventuring on the walls and ceilings, and could have provided more janky physics that we all love from the previous games, and this alone could have made the whole place feel a lot better. Nevertheless, we venture deep into Origin, searching for the control center where we can deactivate the weapon systems. This will take the place of the Eternal Prison, where Melia is initially imprisoned, but instead there will be a control terminal, as well as both Melia and Nia's blades, which will be plugged into Origin. These would be the keys that Nia mentioned before, and is how Zed can manipulate Origin's memories without the presence of a queen, as well as being the reason that both's powers are currently sorely limited. N will still show up all the same, attempting to thwart our plans, but now this line actually has some merit, due to us releasing Melia earlier. These fights can still play out the same, with Melia and Nia joining the fight once we release their blades from Origin's control, and simultaneously preventing Origin from firing wildly on all of Ionios. From this point onwards though, everything will play out the exact same, with us heading to the amphitheater, challenging Zed to a good old brawl, and resetting the world back to normal. But I do want to make one change. Just let us skip the battle cutscenes in this final fight, and even better, add a few checkpoints. This fight took me an hour my first time around, and I dread to think what would have happened if I died halfway through. I also want to add that it's very possible that the DLC story may fix some of the issues that I've discussed today. Maybe there's an important reason why Melia was in Origin. Maybe Dromark is absent because of something in the past. Maybe there's a reason we needed so much Origin metal. Yeah, no, there's no excuse for this one. Still, I believe that this iteration of the ending would have made a whole lot more sense and been a hell of a lot more satisfying to play through, leaving many like myself loving this game like we did with every other Xenoblade, instead of feeling like something was missing and disappointed. That's why I felt it was necessary to mention all of these issues, despite how much I actually adore the game. It's such a shame that Monolith made these rather simple mistakes, which ruined what could have been an amazing finale to the Klaus saga and Xenoblade 3. Hopefully they learn from their mistakes and maybe even take a little inspiration from this video to make sure that the DLC story and future entries don't recreate the same errors, allowing them to continue doing what they've done all along, creating breathtaking worlds, captivating narratives, and unforgettable experiences. The same thing I tried to do when constructing this new ending. Now, there are a few other issues that this game has outside of the ending, such as how Mobius was portrayed, but I've decided to give them their own video. If you'd like to know when that one goes live, then I once more ask you to subscribe to the channel and click that notification bell to stay up to date with all the latest Xenoblade 3 content. I appreciate you all for watching though, and hope to catch you in the next one. This is JB, signing off.